So the Chandler officials are looking at different rules in the city of Chandler in response to what we've seen with some of the East Valley violence, specifically around the Gilbert Goons, which we're still weighing whether or not the Gilbert Goons, self-titled, by the way, are a street gang, right? So we had some people on the social media where horrible trolls come out from under their bridge and see the sunlight. And they were like, why do you keep saying Gilbert Goons? Because that's what they call themselves, and that's how police refer to this group of violent individuals who are committing these acts and then posting themselves online. They call themselves the Gilbert Goons. In the same way that if we were to say there's gang violence perpetrated by MS-13, 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 you wouldn't say, why do you keep saying MS-13?
Yeah, if they called themselves the Chandler Goons, we'd refer to them as the Chandler Goons.
Right.
They call themselves the Gilbert Goons. Yeah. So that's what you're going to hear come out of our names a lot of times. We may just shorten it and say the Goons.
Should we come up with a demeaning nickname like the Gilbert Goobers?
No, to me, they're the Gilbert Goons.
No?
Like you said, self-titled.
Boy, there's a generational divide. Look at that. Pablo, who's our age, laughed at that. Gray, who's a Gen Z, is like, don't talk down to people. Our intern's in there. He's 20 years old. He's like, that's not funny. That's not good. Don't talk down to people. Okay, so Goons Fallout. Headline, Chandler to crack down on brass knuckles and teen parties. During our roundtable discussion last week, we talked with some of our reporters at our partner station there, ABC 15. And they said, watch for this because Chandler is weighing some rules on social hosting and brass knuckles. But didn't we already have a conversation on a state level about brass knuckles?
Yes.
And you can't ban brass knuckles because the state has said you can't ban brass knuckles.
Yeah, the state, if what I recall was basically they felt like it could be a slippery slope and start to get into the Second Amendment. And that's why they said, we don't want to go down this brass knuckles road.
What is between brass knuckles and firearms? Pablo, feel free to get in here on this.
Why would you ask Pablo a
because
question
I'm
like
guessing
that
Pablo, like me, played Double Dragon on Nintendo back in the day. Did you ever play Double Dragon? And you'd get those weapons, right? They had brass knuckles, nunchucks.
Nunchucks, I remember.
You'd end up with a knife or a sword.
What about like throwing? They had throwing stars, didn't they?
So where does throwing stars land on that? Is brass knuckles on the bottom, or is it like a billy club is the lowest level weapon you could have? And then brass knuckles
or
and then
baton.
a knife? Yeah, that's what I meant. Billy club, baton. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, we can start at the baseline baton.
Baton,
yeah.
and then brass knuckles?
Yeah.
And then knife or throwing star? Throwing star.
Anything that can puncture you, yeah.
Yeah. Nunchucks, where do those go? Those are better than a knife or worse than a knife?
Worse, I'm just thinking but better than brass knuckles.
But better than brass knuckles?
Yes.
Okay, so brass knuckles, nunchuck, knife. The reason we bring this up, I'm not being facetious, this is, we talk about a slippery slope. What are the other weapons that we are willing to allow in our state to be carried by randos because we're afraid of some slippery slope? At some point, there has to be a threshold, does there not? Because you've heard the argument before, anything can be turned into a weapon, right? And oftentimes you hear somebody say, if somebody gets hit with a car, they go, well, it's manslaughter and a use of a deadly weapon. And the deadly weapon is the vehicle.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Right. But we're all allowed to go buy a deadly weapon then.
So what's being proposed right now in Chandler would only prohibit the sale to or the supply of and possession of brass knuckles by minors. But where they're running into problems
that's
too.
That's how they're dancing around the state.
That's how they're dancing around the state. But what do you do if you get them off of a military surplus store online? They think that that's still going to be a sticky wicket for them.
Yeah, go to the flea market in the neighboring city.
That's going to be a problem for them.
I mean, isn't that what Chicago's found out with guns? Like, Chicago outlaws guns and people go to Gary, Indiana and bring them back.
What they've pointed out is if somebody under 18 buys them online, the city would likely be unable to enforce the rule against the seller.
Okay. So it's a try anyway, right?
They have to have jurisdiction over the person selling them.
So is this a toothless order that they're looking at?
So, yeah, they're looking at beefing up these ordinances, basically, and making the fine stiffer, ultimately having some jail time associated with them. They do already have...
But they can't enforce it, they said. So they'd be going after sellers?
If it's online. If you're selling in the city of Chandler, they could go after you. But if it's online, let's say you're out of...
Amazon.com will sell
Kentucky or something.
Yeah, okay.
or wherever Amazon happens,
Slamazon.com.
wherever the supplier is.
You think Slamazon.com?
They will not be able to. But
Yes?
if it's
No? Pablo says no.
If it's a surplus store that's actually in Chandler and
Then
a
they
kid
would get
walks in,
ding dong.
they can get them.
Okay.
Now, there is a 2015 code that deals with these party ordinances and things like that.
Yeah.
The 2015 code already allows for fines up to $1,500, things like that going on. They want to rename it, though, the Unruly Gathering Ordinance. So it would include any gathering that, quote, constitutes a threat to the public peace, health, safety, or general welfare, which can range from everything from blocking a road with too many cars to fighting.
Okay. That's going to be tough.
It is going to be tough.
It's going to be tough to enforce.
Uh-huh.
Because of freedom of speech.
It's
have a number of people. There's too many people in the. Is that the Clutch Your Pearls law? There's too many young people in a small area together, and I didn't like it.
Well, I mentioned just a minute ago, they already have a 2015 code that allows for fines up to $1,500 for hosts who break the rules. Guess how many people have been cited in Chandler over the past 3 years as a result of that code?
I can tell you that. I ran into some unruly hooligans, and they were trying to steal my green stamps.
4 kids, 3 adults have been cited in Chandler over the last 3 years.
Well, they have 7, though. That's more than I expected. Joe gives me that look that, okay, not great.
No, way less than great.
So they were charged, but they just cite, is it just a fine?
It was a fine up to $1,500. And the new ordinance that they're looking at would be up to $2,500 fine, 3 years of probation, 180 days in jail, potentially.
Right. So that's inflation.
For the nuisance party ordinance.
All right, that's inflation. That's what happens. So you get we up the fine because of inflation, and then maybe you're going to do jail time, but you won't because you're in Chandler, and you probably have parents that are going to get you a lawyer.
Yeah, and what they've said they want to do is to deter the cool uncle from buying beer and hosting parties, and then having kids drive drunk and get into fights.
Yeah. I appreciate that they're not saying it's the cool parents, because I think a lot of these social hosting parties is the cool parents, not the cool uncle. Because if my parents had found out that my uncle had done something like that, they would have gone over there and castrated him. My mother would have just, little slice and dice would have happened if he were doing that for me. That would not have gone over well in the family.
Thanks for watching The Chris and Joe Show. Click to see more from Chris and Joe, and tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.